what's up guys? Welcome back to an episode of Dirtnation Offroad. So today what we're going to be doing is another Mastering the Tacoma, talking about CV axles and hubs. And for good reason, because now, if you guys watched our last Mastering the Tacoma video, we reviewed our ARB front locker. And in that I was talking about front lockers and when you're supposed to use them and specifically when you're not supposed to use them. I have to eat my own words because I didn't listen to my own advice. Now, a couple weeks ago, we were at Pilot Rock Truck Trail, and during that run, we found a pretty cool section. I was messing around, going through a real deep notch, and as I was climbing a hill, I sent it, and I broke a CV axle. Just real quick, we'll drop in some clips.
A little bit more, driver. Keep that line. Keep that line. Nice and easy. Coming up.
That's lockers, baby.
It's coming up. It's coming up.
Now, in that video, I ended up breaking my driver's side CV axle, and the reason I broke it is because I'm out here just full sending it with a front locker, which the video I uploaded the day before that, I specifically said, don't send it with a front locker. So I didn't listen to my own words. Definitely a learning point for you guys. When you stress your stuff out that much, you're guaranteed to break something. So for that reason, that's why we're going to be talking about some CV axles as well as some hub stuff. Now, normally for previous Mastering the Tacoma videos, I usually have some kind of cheat sheet, some points that I want to talk about, blah, blah, blah. Today, you guys are getting it raw dog. We're just going to talk about stuff. So this is going to be Dustin Mumbles and Rants for a couple hours. Just kidding, not a couple hours. This video shouldn't be that long. Talking about CV axles. What I want to go over with you guys today is, first of all, you know, if you break a CV axle out on your trail, what are your options? Because honestly, if you break a CV axle, that's a whole lot better than a lot of other things you could break. It's way better than breaking a ball joint. It's way better than breaking a tie rod. It's way better than breaking, you know, your spindle in half or a lower arm or anything like that. CV axles are honestly not that bad when you break them. But you got to know what you can do, what you can't do, and what your options are when your CV axle breaks. So I want to go over that today, and then I also want to go over hubs, because when my CV axle broke, it kind of opened up a can of worms with some other, not underlying issues, but just, I mean, this truck's been through some abuse. So because of that, it unlocked some new problems and some new things to fix. So I definitely want to go over those things with you today. So we'll get started on CV axles. So independent front suspension, it's nice for being on the street. It can be nice off-road if you build it right, but typically with stock parts, stock suspension, and then you go and throw a front locker in there, or you're just stressing out the system in general, things are going to break. It's a lot weaker and less durable than a straight axle, you know, setup, but there's benefits and everything to both. So most trucks these days, especially mid-sized trucks, come with an independent suspension. So these are the problems that we're going to have to live with. If you're building a Tacoma, a ZR2, a Ranger, anything like that, you're going to end up with IFS. So you either have to deal with the problems with that, or beef it up and make it better and stronger, and because that is possible. IFS can be superior to a straight axle. I do believe that. I mean, if you look at some King of the Hammers, you know, guys, and they're building their suspension systems right. But I mean, obviously, it takes a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of work. Getting into CV axles, I'm going to show you one that I broke. Now, where's my end snub? So here's the CV axle right here. Now this thing's dirty and gross and greasy and everything in between. This is our end shaft. This is what goes to the wheel. This gets plugged into the hub, and this is our piece that's snapped right here. So it's snapped right on the end, which honestly isn't that bad. Could have been a lot worse, but what I opted to do when that axle broke, you leave this piece inside, and I'll explain that in a second why you want to leave that piece in there. But you do want to take the axle out. That way it's not rolling around and messing up other stuff. Plus it's going to get grease everywhere, because now that the boots are exposed, that's what's going to happen. So what I ended up doing was, let me get my rag. CV axles typically have two things with splines, right? Two end shafts. One goes into the hub, into the wheel, like I said, and then the other side will go into your clamshell or your differential or whatever you want to call it. It's good this one broke and not the other one, because if the other one would have broke, I probably would have been because it's impossible or really, really hard to get that out of there. But anyways, what I ended up doing was, because I broke that end shaft and I had to take the axle out, you have to leave your clamshell piece, which this is the side that's plugged into your clamshell. You have to leave this inside. This has to be still plugged in, because once this comes out, then all your diff oil is coming out. Then you're going to have some more problems beyond a broken axle. So what I opted to do was, where's our ring at? There's a ring that goes around the boot of the CV axle. You take a screwdriver and you just loosen this thing. It's not screwed. You just literally like take a flathead and you just pop it open and you can slip the boot off, because the boot will be right here, and then you have all your your CV axle components on the inside. So slip this off so that this is still inside your differential, and this will spin. That way you're able to drive home. When you break a CV axle out on the trail, first of all, your best bet is if it breaks at either the center section, at the ball at this side of the CV boot, or this side of the CV boot. If this side breaks, it's not the best situation, and if this side breaks, you're pretty much screwed, because like I said, it's really hard to get this out of the clamshell once it's broken. So as I said, the end that broke, it wasn't the worst case scenario, but it wasn't the best case scenario either, because it ended up running into, causing more problems than just the CV axle itself. And that's where we get into hubs. Now, here's the hub on the side that broke. This is, just a regular freaking Toyota hub. I mean, they're pretty simple. Your wheel and your caliper and everything go on this side, and then this side's connected to your spindle, and then the axle shaft itself will go in like that. See, that's exactly how it was inside the axle. It breaking right here, not the worst thing in the world. Now, what I've seen and what you guys have seen in one of our previous Gold Mountain videos, and this is an important part of hubs and something that I just learned, I thought that you could drive with this taken out and just the hub itself. But what I didn't know was, when you drive around, especially with big tires, you have your wheel on this side, spindle on this side, and nothing holding it together on the inside. What happens is you put a lot of pressure on your bearing system. And what that can cause is for that to come apart. And you guys saw that in our Gold Mountain video, where the big Chevy Suburban, he broke a CV axle, and he broke it at the boot, which, like I said, it's not a big problem. But he took out his end shaft, and that caused his wheel to freaking open up like a can of worms, and his bearings were all over the place. Luckily, we were able to put it back together and get him off the trail, but his wheel fell off, and that was pretty crazy. So the fact that I left this piece in was a big deal, and that's a big learning point for you guys. When you break on the trail, you need to make sure both the end shafts are still in the differential and into your hub, because that way you're still able to drive home. And yeah, you're not gonna be able to 4x4, but you can drive on two-wheel drive just fine. Now, getting back to my CV axle break and the things that followed, first and foremost, when the CV axle broke, I had an ABS light come on right away, which, I mean, it makes sense. You have a lot of sensors and stuff down there, so when something breaks, who knows what else happens. So ABS light was on. And then second of all, I also had a problem with my brakes. Now, I thought it was related to ABS, but it wasn't. What I was having is I was pressing the brake about halfway. It wasn't braking at all. And then when I pressed up and pressed it again, then it would start to brake normal. It would take 2 to 3 times of pressing the brake before the brake would actually work. And we'll get into why that happened. Now, the next night, ended up replacing the CV axle. It's already on the truck. I recorded some footage, which I can drop in here and do whatever. So replaced the CV axle. Everything went well with that. Plugged right in. Everything good to go. I ended up going over to ABC Axle and getting a rebuilt axle from them. And then they charge you a core charge, but I wanted to keep this old axle for the video. I'll probably trade it in later. So after replacing my CV axle, I was still dealing with the brakes issue as well as the ABS light. Now, in addition to the ABS light, the ABS also caused me to have issues with turning on four-wheel drive, because when you turn on four-wheel drive, it would say four-wheel drive engagement error or something like that. Pretty much it was saying it wasn't going into four-wheel drive, although if you listen to the truck, it would turn into four-wheel drive. It'll also turn into four low, but what it wouldn't do is it wouldn't turn on the lockers, and then you couldn't use on any features such as, MTS, couldn't use crawl control or anything like that, which I haven't been using that stuff too much lately, so that's not that big of a deal. All I really care about is a rear locker and a front locker. And the reason all that is important is because although I broke on a Thursday, I fixed the axle on a Friday, and then I had to go wheeling Saturday. So what I opted to do is I found a workaround using a scanner. So I picked this up from AutoZone for like $60, and this is a ABS and engine code one, so you have to make sure you get an ABS one. But a workaround that I found was plug this into the truck when you turn it on, clear your ABS code, it'll turn everything off in terms of engine codes and ABS codes. You can now change it to four-wheel drive, four low, put your rear locker on. This is a workaround, but I wouldn't recommend doing it because now you're just you're tricking the computer. That's pretty much what you're doing. So, I mean, in terms of safety and stuff like that, I wouldn't highly recommend it, but this is what I did so that I can go wheeling on Saturday. I did my wheeling, all that stuff, still dealing with the ABS light. What we opted to do was, when I scanned it, it said a open circuit on the left-hand driver's side, which that's the side that I broke, which makes sense. Started with checking the wiring as well as the speed sensor itself. So check the wiring. I went over that with my buddy Junior. We use a voltmeter and test lights and everything like that. Turns out the wiring was just fine, which is good. Usually the wiring is what breaks, because you snap an axle or you stretch it too much and it'll like kink that wire and it won't work anymore. The other thing that I thought it was a speed sensor. So this is the brand new speed sensor that I ended up picking up from Amazon. This is a cheap one, but this wasn't the problem either, because when I did replace it, the ABS light didn't go away. So I still had this ABS issue, plus I still had the braking issue of pressing the brakes and everything like that happened. At that point, what we narrowed it down to was probably being the hub itself, which ended up being the case. I ended up replacing both hubs just to kind of catch you guys up on what's going on. I ended up replacing both hubs. I took it to a buddy's dealership and he helped me out with that. Getting those replaced. But the reason I had to replace it on the driver's side was when the axle snapped, there's a little ring, and you can't really see it now, although you can see some damage right here because the axle snapped right here. So it was just all this violence and torque and everything like that, to where you can see there's a ring right there and you can see all the damage around the ring. And I'll show you what the other one looks like, because it doesn't have any damage like that. This one, the ring is complete and it's not all chewed up and messed up. So this ring was damaged, and with it, there's like a magnetic ring, or I think they call it a tone ring, which is inside here, which your speed sensor, which gets plugged into your spindle, as this is turning, it'll, sense your speed. It's a speed sensor. That's what it's meant to do. Mine wasn't doing that. It was acting as if the other three wheels were spinning just fine, and this one wasn't spinning, which is why I kept getting an ABS light. I ended up having to replace the hub on this side, which now I'm left with a hub that physically works just fine. This one is now a spare. If for any reason I ever break a hub out on the trail, I can use this one to get off the trail, although I will run into this speed sensor issue again, which is fine because I already know the workaround because I have the freaking scanner. No problem. So this is now my spare hub. Now for the second hub. This is where I don't get it. It's usually what happens with old trucks like these, but this is a newer truck, and this is happening where you find one issue, leads to another problem, which leads to 3 more problems. Now, broken CV axle, broke the hub, had to fix the hub, do all that stuff. What happened during all of this, I actually had a incident where I was driving to Costco after my broken CV axle, and my right side, passenger side tire completely locked up driving to Costco, to where it was like I'm just driving and then all of a sudden this sucker locks up. Turns out the reason it locked up was all this shaking and off-roading and stuff like that. I ended up having a caliper bolt back itself out to where now the caliper moves. So when I pressed the brake, it would push against the wheel rather than braking on the rotor. So that caused my wheel to lock up, which caused the other hub to break, coincidentally. And that is what caused me to have the issue of press the brakes, it wouldn't brake at first. Because what was happening was my hub, which is this one right here. Now, let me show you the difference, okay? This is a perfectly fine physical hub, right? No play. You don't hear any bearings. You hear the bolts moving, but if I hold the bolts, you're not going to hear any bearings. There's no bearings moving, okay? It spins just fine. There's no play. Now let's look at the other side that broke. This is the other hub. Take a look at this. That's a big problem. That's wheel fall off central right there. And what was happening was, when I tried to, the wheel was spinning, right? And it's shaking like this because you have all this play. And as the wheel's spinning and it's shaking, what's happening is as I press the brake, the caliper isn't grabbing it right because it's shaking so much. So the first one didn't even like compute. You press the brake, it didn't brake. Then come up, press the brake again, and then it would hold it correctly and press the brakes. So, fun fact, I actually wheeled 3 times. 3 times with a bad hub like that, which I got very, very lucky. Very fortunate to be able to make it through all that, because Cougar Buttes, Cleghorn review with Carlos, as well as one other trip, was on that bad hub, and I'm very, very lucky that my wheel didn't fall off during all that, because that would have been a very bad, very, very bad break. So this hub, definitely no bueno. This one is going in the trash. I have absolutely no use for it, because that's really bad. And you can hear the bearings. You hear that? You can hear the ball bearings in there. So that hub is no good. Like I said, is weird enough, because we break a CV axle on one side, and that's all fine. That's what's going to happen when, like I said, you lock your front and send it and do all that stuff. That's what's going to happen. Break that. I ended up breaking the tone ring on the hub, which is fine. But then to have this completely opposite issue where another hub goes bad, which causes my freaking brake caliper to come loose and lock up the wheel, it's crazy. It's crazy that this stuff happens all at the same time, but we're able to get it taken care of and all good to go. Now, a couple notes before wrapping up. Obviously, carry spare parts at all times. Carry an extra hub, carry extra tie rods, carry extra CV axles, carry extra this, extra that. Carry extra of everything if you can. Whatever's within your budget and whatever fits in your vehicle. Especially if you're like us, you're sending all over the place and you're not really giving any craps about what happens. Make sure you're doing that. Another note, make sure you know when you have a breakdown, what your options are. CV axles, you have a lot of options when something breaks. Just make sure that you don't put yourself in a position that's gonna cause more damage or more breakdowns, or you to not even be able to take the vehicle home. That can be a big deal. We definitely don't want that happening. In terms of hubs, stuff like that, make sure you're always checking your parts. Every time you take your vehicle off the floor, shake the wheel, see if there's any play. If it's the bearing, you could usually hear it. Or if you hear any like disgusting humming coming from one wheel, that might be your bearing. There's a couple ways to know if it's that. So that's pretty much it for today's Mastering the Tacoma. You know, I rambled for long enough. I think definitely some good learning points for myself. I've learned a lot about hubs and CV axles and everything in between this week. And hopefully we're able to teach you guys some stuff so that when you're out there on the trail and you're running into these problems, you know exactly how to take care of them. But we're all done for now. If you guys have any questions, any comments, anything like that, let us know. Comment below. We love hearing from you. But other than that, I want to thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe to channel. It's also on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Patreon. You can also hit us up for shirts at dirtnationoffroad@gmail.com. But other than that, thank you guys. We'll see you again next time.